All right. So basically, what's on this image here is a body cavity, and specifically in this image, they're talking about the abdominopelvic cavity. So abdomen and pelvis. There's two cavities actually that make up the abdominopelvic cavity. Sometimes you'll see them combined, like in this diagram here, but here on the right, I found this other picture that I felt like was helpful. It shows a bunch of different body cavities, and you can see that these are just spaces where different organs can reside inside your body. So, like you can see, these over here, you have your lungs and your heart, obviously, in these upper portions of the thoracic cavity. Your brain can be up here in the cerebral cavity, but in the abdominopelvic cavity, which is the combination of the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity, you mostly have digestive organs. So that's what I have written here, mostly digestive organs. And these three pictures here are kind of just illustrating how organs are able to sit in these cavities, because they don't just float around in free space, obviously, because that would be a problem. They have to be anchored down to something, right, to keep them where they need to be. And so that's what these diagrams are showing here. So some of the key terms that I think are important to know first off, is when they say ventral, that word just means like the front of the body, and dorsal is going to refer to the back. So in this picture here, you can see there's like a spine right here, a vertebrae. And so this would be the dorsal side. This is like the back portion of you. And this is the ventral side. So this would be the front part of you. So they basically just take a cross section, if they were to take a slice, like if they were doing an MRI or some other imaging technique like that, you just kind of see this horizontal view, I guess, of the inside of your body. And so this cavity in gray is the peritoneal cavity. And outlining it, we have this peritoneum, which is basically the lining. You can think of it as like the wall, I guess, of this cavity. Um, and then within it, you have your organs, and there's some fluid in there too, just to keep everything comfortable. There are two different um, types of peritoneum that you'll need to know. So the first one is the parietal peritoneum, which parietal just means wall. So if you ever see the word parietal, like in the skull, you have like the parietal bone. You also have in your brain the parietal lobe. Um, they call it that because it's kind of on the side and it sort of forms like a wall, you could say, of like your skull or in your brain. So the parietal peritoneum does the same thing. It just forms this outer wall of the peritoneal cavity. Then you have your visceral peritoneum, which is kind of blocked out in this picture for some reason, but I wrote it over here. So the visceral peritoneum is the lining of the peritoneum that goes around the actual organ that's sitting here in the cavity. And so visceral means internal. So if you see that word, you can think internal. Your organs are sitting internally within this peritoneal cavity, right? Um, this connection between the parietal peritoneum and the visceral peritoneum is known as the mesentery. So the mesentery is basically a bridge between the parietal peritoneum and the visceral peritoneum. So it's the way that you connect this organ that's here in the cavity to the actual peritoneum, or the wall, right, that's around here in this cavity. So that's super important, and you can have them attaching to this back portion of the parietal peritoneum, and when it goes towards the back, then it's known as a dorsal mesentery. So dorsal means the back. So dorsal mesentery is basically the bridge connecting the organ to the back of the parietal peritoneum. You can also, like in this image here, you can have a similar kind of bridge structure, but it's coming from the front, from like the ventral side. So for that reason, when you have this type of bridge coming out, it's called a ventral mesentery. And so, like your liver, like they have in this diagram, has both of those things. Or at least not both of them, but it has two ventral mesenteries because they originate primarily from the front of the parietal peritoneum. Um, and so basically, these are just attachment points that hold the organ in place. Without them, they'd be flying all over the place in here whenever you ran or walked or laid down or did something. So it's really important that you have these connection points here. The last thing that we have in this bottom portion of the image is sometimes when you have an organ like this, as you develop, the mesentery might get resorbed, kind of taken up back into um, just this tissue behind the peritoneal cavity. And so when that happens, the organ actually sits behind the peritoneal cavity. So it's no longer within it, but it's kind of just on the other side of it. So when it's that scenario, it's called a retroperitoneal position. So retro means like back, right? Like if you think of like retro clothing or music or something, like you think of like back in the 70s, 80s, whatever time, right? So retroperitoneal just means like behind the peritoneum, basically. Um, So that's essentially everything that's going on in this diagram. Let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll get to the next video here in a minute. Thanks.